Poland back then was grey, broke and worn out, coming off decades of communism, and a video game was not a thing you could just walk into a shop and buy. And somewhere in all of that was a boy completely gone on games. His name was Konrad Tomaszkiewicz. The computer he had was a hand-me-down, a ZX Spectrum, passed down from a cousin, and it came with a catch. There was no cassette deck to load a game from. So, he found the one way in that was left to him. He bought a magazine. It was called Botchtech, and it printed games the long way around, as code, page after page of it. When one turned up that he wanted to play, he sat down at the keyboard and typed the whole thing in by hand, line by line, character by character. And if one character was wrong anywhere in all those pages, none of it would run, and he would have to go back and hunt down the single mistake before he could play a thing. It all started when he was 8 or 9. The first game he ever played was on a little Eastern Bloc console, something called Wolf and Hare. After that, it was anything he could get his hands on. But the home all of this happened inside was not an easy one. His father was a surgeon, a sought-after one, and a drinker, and the marriage came apart and went back together and came apart more than once. Money was short in a way that never quite let go. Before the worst of it, the family had taken out a loan to build a house near Warsaw, and then the Polish economy came apart too, inflation running wild, and the loan turned into a weight none of them could get out from under. His mother carried most of that weight. She kept the family standing more or less on her own, paying off one loan by taking out the next. And somewhere in the middle of all that, she still found the money to put a computer in front of her son. He knew what it had cost her. All she wanted back was for him and his younger brother to grow up and do something they loved. To dig the family out, his father took a surgeon's contract abroad in Libya, and when Konrad was 9, the rest of them went out to join him. They lived over there in a guarded block with bars over the windows. You did not go outside. It was not safe out there. So the whole world shrank down to a handful of rooms, and the thing that made those rooms livable was an Atari he had bought off his cousin and carried across with a bag full of game cassettes. One afternoon, in another boy's room in that same barred building, he saw a game called Monkey Island running on a PC, and he fell for it completely. When they came home to Poland, they landed in a suburb called Stara Milosta, and it was the boys next door who let him in on what they got up to in the evenings. They played tabletop role-playing games, Warhammer and Call of Cthulhu, whole worlds run out of rulebooks and dice and someone describing a room you could not see. He took it to the way he took to everything he loved, all the way in. Fantasy novels stacked up on top of the games. And there was one game that got its hooks in deeper than the rest, a dungeon crawler called Eye of the Beholder, the first that ever made him feel like he was really a part of it. None of it was the plan. The plan was medicine. His mother had always wanted him to sit the entrance exam for the medical academy and pass it, and with a surgeon for a father, that was the way his whole life pointed. He sat the exam and missed the cut for the doctor track. So rather than lose a year waiting to try again, he took a place in the field the academy had only recently opened, emergency medicine, the training that puts you in the back of the ambulance and the trauma room when the worst has already happened. And he did the real work. He did his rounds at hospitals, stitched people back together, put breathing tubes down throats, stood in on x-rays. One night, they brought in a motorcyclist whose skull had to be opened up on the table. A trepanation, and Konrad was one of the pairs of hands in the room helping the surgeons do it. This was going to be his life, the ambulances and the trauma rooms. A serious life, the kind his mother had gone without so much to get him to. He paid his way through it however a student does. In the summers, he took whatever there was. He fitted windows, he waited tables. One year, he went out to Switzerland and picked grapes on a harvest. And the whole time, the games sat off to the side of it, out of reach. As far as he could tell, making them was not a job that someone like him got to have. You had to be an engineer, he figured, or somebody out of art school, not a medic from a Warsaw suburb. For a long time, it was just a dream. Then, near the end of his studies, two things landed on him at once. The first was a piece of news. He was on the mailing list for Gry Online, the Polish games site, and one day the newsletter carried a line that stopped him cold. A Polish studio was making a game out of The Witcher, Andrzej Sapkowski's Witcher, the books he had grown up on, that dark and morally tangled fantasy that felt like it had come up out of his own corner of the world. The studio was called CD Projekt, and up to then they were known, if they were known for anything, as the people who imported and translated other companies' games for the Polish market. Now, they were trying to build one of their own. The second thing was that it was summer again, and he needed the money. CD Projekt was looking for testers, so he applied. They gave him a test. They handed him a game they were working with called The Punisher, and told him to go away and write up everything that was wrong with it. As it happened, he had been playing The Punisher for the last 3 months anyway, for his own amusement, so he already knew every seam and crack in it. He came back with 5 pages of bugs. They looked at the 5 pages, and they took him on, at the very bottom, at a student's hourly rate, in the studio's office on Jagiellońca Street in Warsaw. He had come in for the summer, for a bit of holiday money before getting on with the serious business of medicine. He had spent his working life up to then on building sites and in bars, the kind of work where if you forgot your sandwich, you went hungry, and if the day was cold, then you were cold. He walked into CD Projekt, and it was warm. There was coffee whenever you wanted it. At some point, somebody ordered pizza in for everyone, and all around him were people who did nothing all day but talk about games, argue about them, his people. He had walked into another world, and it was, in his own words, paradise on earth. So the summer job did not stay a summer job. He stayed 17 years, because he turned out to be a strange sort of tester. Most testers find a problem, write it down, and move on. Conrad would find the problem, then go and track down the designer responsible for it, and tell them what was wrong and how he would have done it instead. Then he would come back and do it again the next day, about the next thing. He was, by his own account, genuinely annoying to have around. It went on long enough that a designer, worn thin, finally threw it back at him. If he was so clever, he could do it himself. So they moved him across into the design department. Within a couple of months, he was scripting. Real game logic, on an old engine, the one that had run Neverwinter Nights, where the world got put together by hand, a piece at a time, down to the torches burning on the walls. And he could not put it down. Early on, still learning how it all worked, he went to bed one night with a scripting problem he could not crack, still turning over in his head. And he dreamed the answer, the actual working lines of it. He woke, wrote them down before they could slip away, and ran them, and they worked. His brain, he said, just would not switch off. The medic who had handed him 5 pages of bugs was building worlds now. The first Witcher came out in 2007. It had taken the studio something like 5 years to make, and it came out rough in places, but it worked, and it was the first game Conrad ever helped put into the world. And when it was done, and the studio turned its mind to a second one, a man named Adam Badowski came and asked Conrad to help him build it. Conrad said yes, and he took charge of the quests. On the first Witcher, the people who wrote the story had also been the ones stuck trying to wire it into the game, fighting with code they had never been trained to write. So Conrad put together a team to stand in that gap, people who understood the story and could also write the scripts that turned it into something you could play. He called it the Quest Department. It was the first thing he ever built that was made out of people instead of code. His younger brother was one of them. Mateusz had come up with the same road from the bottom, testing games on the first Witcher, and now he was a quest designer on the second, a step or two behind Conrad, the two of them building the thing side by side. And the way the work itself got done changed too. On the old engine, if a quest broke or you just wanted to try it a different way, there was often no fixing it. You threw the whole thing out and started over, and the lost days added up. So on the second Witcher, they built themselves a better way to work, one where you could try an idea and throw it out again without losing a week to it. And the second game came together far faster than the first. The Witcher 2 came out in the spring of 2011. The reviews were strong, scores up in the high 80s, and for the first time, people outside Poland started paying real attention to what the studio could do. And when it was finished, Adam Badowski came to Conrad one more time. There was going to be a third Witcher. It would be the biggest and most ambitious thing the studio had ever set out to make. And Badowski wanted Conrad to run the whole of it. He was 29 years old, and he had never directed a game in his life.